Okay, prototypes. So they're great because, well, for among other reasons, they help us validate design decisions without using lots of resources. You guys are probably familiar with tools like Envision and Marvel. And these are really cool tools, and they're simple, and they're actually pretty fun to use. I recently used Marvel on a UX design project for a mobile app called Collecture, which is built for recording and sharing lectures. Now I know this is a group called Web Zürich, not Mobile App Zürich, but I'm introducing this for a reason you'll see later. I exported all those screens, brought them into Marvel, and linked them up in this kind of click-through prototype, which, you know, it's kind of game-like. It's really fun, but it gets overwhelming pretty quickly. You start adding more screens to the flow, and of course you can't do any complex interactions. Here's me. This is me trying to remember the flow. Oh, I'm supposed to push there. No, down there. Where am I supposed to push now? And then there's several ways these prototypes fall short for me, and one is, of course, screen size. You have to choose which size to build for, and your prototypes won't look accurate on other screen sizes. And it bugs me that the whole screen has to slide over. You know, that record button should stay where it is. You know, I just want the one bottom part to slide over, for example. And as soon as I want to add other elements, like I had to add some buttons here, then I had to go in and change it on all screens. And don't even get me started on making kind of little tweaks like the size of these boxes. And this is a little exaggerated. And this is, of course, something that we have to do as designers sometimes, right? But this just feels to me like really tedious work that I would love to avoid, if possible, because I'm lazy. So I'm thinking there must be a better way. We're disappointing people here with all this extra work. And one thing I like to do, my prototypes using web technology. And I'm going to give you a quick demo of how I start that out. Here's an example of that same prototype, but done in HTML and CSS and a little bit of JavaScript. And the idea is fake everything, fake all the things, that you want it to feel like, you almost fool somebody into thinking it's a real app, right? Everything is clickable, the animations, you know, just feel like real. You can use kind of these native UI components, you know, menus and things like that. And it totally works on any device size. This is a smaller phone, and everything is sort of in its place and looking the right size. And it can totally be built by one person in like a day or two, max. One thing I'm really interested more and more lately is in this, how we can improve the workflow between designers and developers. What can designers hand off to developers, besides bananas, that clarify their intention and can speed up the process? Should designers learn to code? Should they learn the command line? My argument is they should, to a certain extent. And we can argue about it afterwards if you want. But one of my favorite arguments about this is the Photoshop argument. Photoshop is a really complex, advanced piece of software, and sometimes it looks like an airplane cockpit. And yet, designers oftentimes learn how to use it. And I think learning a few commands on the command line and learning a little bit of Sass and maybe a JavaScript function, jQuery, you know, it can't be harder than learning Photoshop. So, a little introduction to some tools. The baseline tool for me is a static site generator, because you just sort of open a project and it just gives you all a bunch of stuff that you need already. It's kind of like a simple CMS for creating sites without a database. I like Jekyll as a static site generator because it's really simple. It plays well with GitHub pages, which is key for me in deploying my prototypes to share with stakeholders and collaborators. And since I have Jekyll installed on my computer, I can, all I have to do to start up a new project is type Jekyll, hello, or Jekyll new, and then the name of the project. And then it just kind of spills some files into a folder, and then it's ready to go. I have to just switch into that directory, and I can just run Jekyll serve, and it will compile all the files, and it will launch a virtual server on my machine. If I go into a browser and go to localhost 4000, then there's my site. And since I want to do an app prototype and not an ugly blog prototype, I want to basically get rid of all this stuff. So this is the file structure that it gave me, and it may look a little confusing, but I get to ignore most of this stuff. This is an index file, and it's blank, and it's using this default template. So if I go into it's right there, layouts, default. If I go into that file, all I really want is this content block, this little tag that says content. I can erase everything else inside the body tag except for that one. And if we go back to the browser, save that, and refresh the browser page, then we should see nothing. Okay, great. So now, I want to scaffold out, let's add a little content. Let's just test it out with an H1 tag. Now, I'm using, for this, I installed a plugin which gives me pug, which is an HTML abstraction because it's super easy to read. Instead of having two H1 tags with content in it, I can just write H1 and then the content after it. And things can nest just by indenting. It's really super, super easy. So now that's what it looks like. So for the sake of time, let's just make a really basic prototype. We'll do something with just like a top section that stays in place, and then 3 panels on the bottom which slide. So it's kind of an approximation of that prototype that I showed earlier. So let's just scaffold that out really quickly by having this top section that's a div with an ID top, a div with an ID bottom, and then nested inside that, I'll do 3 panels. So each panel will get a class panel, and each panel will get its own unique class. 1, 2, and 3. Okay. And now, this is what it looks like. So not sexy yet. We just need to add a little bit of style to it. So this is because Jekyll comes with Sass out of the box, I can just start writing some Sass here. I'll just give the top section 100 width and a height of 30 view height, and give it a background color. I want to see what that looks like. Sorry. Top. Again, we're just doing a piece of code again. And give it a background color of lime, and let's refresh the browser. Okay, there's our top section. Looks awesome. Let's do the same thing for the bottom, except the bottom is going to be 70%. You can't see it because of this scroll bar. And it's going to get a background color as well. Okay, so now we just need to do the panels. So I'm going to give each panel also a full width and 100% height of its container. And then each individual panel gets a separate background color just so I can tell them apart. And they'll each get their own left position. So the first one should be on the screen, and the next 2 should be pushed 100% off the screen. So if you save that, refresh the browser, and we can see that we have a bit of a problem because they're stacked vertically. We want them to be side by side. So what we have to do is give the panel class a position of absolute and refresh the browser, and now it seems to be working because we can only see one. What about these ugly scroll bars? Can we get rid of those? Well, we have to do just add a body, add a overflow hidden to the body. And that should get rid of scroll bars. Okay, great. Now we have this kind of fake thing where everything looks like it fits in that little browser window. So what about on a phone? Because we're making like a phone app prototype. Well, if we want to look at it on another device, all I have to do is do Jekyll serve again, but with a special flag. So if I give it this host 0000, I can access it on any device on my network. So if I go to the IP address of my computer from my phone, then I can see the same code that I'm seeing in the browser. So now let's make the panels slide. When I want to click the top section and have the panel slide, just as a kind of a simple interaction. So I'm just going to use jQuery because it's the fastest way, and it doesn't have to be very high tech because it's just a prototype. Remember, we're just faking it. So whatever it takes to get the fake into this browser, I'm going to use. So I'm just going to download jQuery from a CDN. I'm going to have my own little app.js file. So if I open a new file and I just do an alert just to test it out, I can save it as app.js. And then if I refresh the browser, then I see my help. So it seems to be working. So now what I need to do is just write a simple JavaScript function that does the logic of this switching. And all I'm going to do is create this click counter. And every time I click on the top section, I'm going to increase the click counter. I'm going to add a class to the bottom section. So if it's 0, I'm going to add a class of basically second. You'll go to the second one, and so on and so on. If it gets to the third click, then it's going to refresh the counter to 0. And this is the only JavaScript that I need right now. It's not elegant, but it doesn't have to be. And now if I open up the dev tools, I can see, okay, when I click the top section, I'm changing the class of the bottom section. So now, in order to make it take effect visually, I just need to add a couple more styles. So I just need to, every time, because this is nested Sass, or SCSS, when the bottom section gets a class first, then the panel should move, or should stay the same. If it gets a class of second, the panel should slide over 100% to the left. If it gets a class of third, the panel should slide over 200%. I have to change that 3-1 because it was going to be on top of the second one. And then I just need to add a transition, and then I click, and it should work. So there's my prototype in the browser, and here's the same thing on the phone. So it's just a start, but it's it's a pretty good start for 15 minutes of work. And the next step, and it was pretty easy actually to get that far. So the next step would be, now that's not what I wanted. I didn't want to get that far yet. The next step is maybe I'm ready to show it to people or get feedback on it from my colleagues, or then I can just deploy it to GitHub Pages, which is free hosting, which is super easy to deploy, and I just share the link. And then maybe I want to add data, and there's really cool ways to integrate custom data in Jekyll, and maybe I can show that in a future session, and then just create components that are generated from the data, and then just iterate on it. Make a little change, push it up to GitHub Pages again, share the link, or they can just refresh their browser and they can see the changes. So that's faking all the things. Thanks.